This episode of Bulletproof Cash Flow is brought to you by Realty Dynamics. Learn how people like you can build substantial passive income while creating wealth for the long term through real estate investing. Visit rdyne.com. That's RDYNE.com.
There was an agreement made without anything on paper, right? Like the most common reason that I would say within a family, this type of stuff goes south. And formality keeps people friends, right? Keeps family. And that's the type of stuff that oftentimes does lead to hardship, and it leads to lost capital, and it leads to broken relationships, frankly. And that stuff kind of breaks my heart when I hear about it, because there's so many more positive, wonderful ways to de-risk these types of investments.
Working because you want to, not because you have to, is financial freedom. And we want to help you create that. Welcome to the Bulletproof Cash Flow Show. We're going to teach you how to achieve lifetime financial freedom through real estate investment. Your host is a multifamily syndicator and property developer. He's done deals reaching into the hundreds of millions of dollars. You'll hear from experts in all aspects of real estate investment, finance, development, and management. Everything you need is right here. This is the Bulletproof Cash Flow Show. And this is your host, Augustino Pintus.
Hey folks, ever wonder how you found this podcast? Was it LinkedIn, Instagram, a tweet? Well, here's the deal. I don't do ads. I don't do sponsorships. All I ask is that you pay it forward. If someone shared or recommended this podcast to you, do the same. A review, a mention, anything helps. Thanks so much. Hey everyone, it's Augustino. Like many people out there, I started my journey doing small deals. I did single families, small multifamily, then I started doing big multifamily. Now at first, I was doing all the work while I was in corporate, but now I'm just focused on building the real estate portfolio and making money for my investors. Now our next guest had a very similar path. He started his career building high-tech firms, high-tech teams in corporate America, but he left to make that shift into real estate. Now, with that decision, he co-founded Madison Investing, where he and his team put real estate syndications together with the intent of building passive income for their investors. Madison currently manages about 6,000 units, has done over $800 million in total acquisitions in multifamily and storage. So with all that, I'd like to welcome my good friend, Spencer Hellegas. Spencer, thanks for coming on, bud.
Honored to be here. Thank you so much for having me on, Augustino. Already having a blast just chatting with you for a few minutes before we hit record here today. So honored to be here.
It's been fun. It's been fun so far. Can't wait to get into it here. So, guys, I like what Spencer has to say. You can reach him via the contact page at madisoninvesting.com. Okay, Spencer, go ahead and tell the listeners a little bit about your journey.
Yeah, happy to. 2023, what a year. Here I'm sitting, financially free, as we often talk about in the real estate investing world. I grew up in a real estate household and then got scared into tech for 13 years. My dad was a broker. Like many of us do, I said, I don't know if I want to do what my family did. Didn't want to work at open houses. Didn't want to go clean out old fridges at rentals. Hence, jumped into a bunch of tech companies over the course of 13 years and started a family. And now on the other side of that, we hit our financial freedom number from investing passively and getting active over the course of 5 years, Augustino. And so sitting here is a hard-fought culmination of blood, sweat, and tears over many years, sleepless nights, and we're now having invested in, we're now in over 50, I think over 60 different deals on LP or GP or both within multifamily, self-storage, and beyond. Based out here in the Bay Area, California. I live in Alameda, cool little island next to Oakland across from San Francisco. And we are literally 5 days away from going and living in the country of Portugal with our entire family for the first time. We've never taken the kids with us on a trip like that. And that's because of the financial freedom we've achieved. So it's been a ride, and we're just getting started.
That's nice. So, and you're living in California.
Yes, sir.
Is that what you said?
Yep. Bay Area.
One of the highest taxed state ever devised, I think. Right?
Unfortunately. Yeah.
Unfortunately. And you say they're on purpose.
I do. And I'm always happy to talk about this. I think on one hand, absolutely, bittersweet because correct. I have lived outside California, so I'm not 100% delusional Californian West Coaster, lived in Colorado for a glorious decade, but I would say that came back willingly. One of the things that will likely eventually take us out of here, maybe when the kids are older or grown or we change our minds until then, will be what you just described. So many of us love the benefits of real estate investing because of the growth, the cash flow, but also, man, the tax benefits. And I would say that I don't get to realize the full benefits of those right now for exactly what you just said. So I'm thrilled to always be able to help the other fellow investors that we work with in our club and beyond when they're not here, but they're investing in real estate outside of California. And I would just wanted to add that we might own a home here. We're in our second home we've owned in California. We have not invested in real estate ever since our first rental, which we also still own. And it costs $430,000 in Vallejo, California for $200 a month in cash flow. You call that a tuition in the form of real estate investing. It has appreciated a couple $100,000, Agostino, but I would say that $200 a month in cash flow that we get is a constant reminder of what we could have done better with that $100K cash down.
That's right. That's right. So it's interesting though, because right now then, obviously you're not, quote, working a active job. You're getting passive income. And it's interesting that you're still able to stay in a place like California, because that money still gets taxed, I imagine, as income, but it's taxed differently, right?
Correct. And again, I'll give my responsible nerdy disclaimer for everybody. I'm not a CPA. I'm just talking about my own stuff here. But yeah. Your question is spot on, which is there's some benefits that we get to realize. We get passive income from many of the investments that we've made along the way. We still do some in our household. When I say we, it's not the royal we. That's my better half. Jennifer, she is the co-founder of our group, as well as I know you and I were talking about how you and your better half partner on business. So we do some consulting. There's active work. We will partner on deals in addition to the passive income that we get from deals. But man, depreciation losses do not help as much. Particularly on the state level. Federal, they can still help. The state, oh no, sir.
Yeah. Well, but the reason why I'm reiterating on that and talking about it is just because I know that I have friends that actually they're capital raisers out of your state, out of California, and they never invest in California or in Hawaii for that matter. They invest, either on the mainland or obviously outside of California. And they're still able to realize the benefits of real estate without getting killed as much as if they did own it in that state. So, 100%. I mean, there's some credence. Yeah, there's some credence there in what you just said a second ago in terms of the depreciation, certainly all that. But it's like, to try to stay there is, I mean, I know it's beautiful. That's what everybody tells me, how nice it is. But I don't know. It's. I
mean, and I won't win anyone over who's already on the other side of that fence right now, and there's no harm taken on either side. I will just say that as a proud Californian, it's a solid 70 degrees and hovering around there right now in the middle of a heat wave in other parts of the country. So those are in fact shots fired if anyone really wants to get into it. But there's no one's arguing that California's not awesome, right?
It is. It's a nice place to visit, but I don't want to live there. That's the way I put it.
That's right.
Yes. So good. So you got started then, and obviously, in your case, I think what held you back is really the fear, or you didn't want to get into the family business, so to speak, because you thought that it was just going to be, cleaning toilets, cleaning up refrigerators, and dealing with termites and all that fun stuff. What do you think holds back many other investors from getting into the real estate game?
Oh, that's a fun question. I would say so many of us grow up, even if we're not in any way touching the real estate business, right? Like families out there, parents working a salary job, like traditional job. They sit around the dinner table and there's always going to be that story, at least one. And it's going to be a story from an aunt, an uncle, father, grandfather, grandmother, whatever, about probably someone losing their figurative shirt. They invested in a development deal and lost it all. They bought a property and it was a nightmare. It was a money pit. And I would have to think that is the idea that sits within most human beings' minds if they've sat there and heard those stories, which is real estate's expensive, real estate's complex, real estate is very long-term. It locks you in. Real estate is a way to lose all your money. And I think that's really what holds most people back. It certainly held me back before I went down this journey of education, and skinning one's knees, figuratively, is part of the learning journey. And I went through some of that early in life. I got to see some of that, but it was such a narrow lens, Agostino. I'll keep this brief, but I'll just say that when I was working for my dad, I did that up until maybe I was an early teenager. And then I got a taste of what happens when a single income household does not have a source of income as strong as it used to, because we went through a really challenging decade. Basically, without going TMI, lost many family members, starting with my younger brother to cancer. Grandparents died within a couple of years after that, and the dominoes fell. And that I'm not looking for sympathy here because I'm just one person, and there's way harder stories out there. But hardship opens your eyes, and I think that what I witnessed as a kid, as a teenager at that point, was what happens when one income from a working person, like a broker in this case, goes way, way down. That business shrank, and it changed our lifestyle significantly, and he was one of the top brokers in the country. He bounced back and he's doing great now, many years later. But now I find myself being the dad. And when I was sitting in my W-2 career, 9 years in, 10 years into my 13-year career, and I had my own family with a couple of boys I was raising, and they were young, sitting there going, well, there's just got to be a different way than me grinding it out, not seeing my infant son for 2 weeks because we're going to work so early it's still dark, coming back home from work so late that it's dark, and waiting for the Silicon Valley lottery, as it's called, to somehow absolve all of our financial sins and my judgments along the way, right? And so that was my catalyst, and I just kind of wanted to share that with you. Is like everyone's going to find their own, and there's plenty of reasons not to go do something. There's always going to be reasons not to go take a risk. But as regards to real estate and real estate investing, it's always been, as long as modern history's been around, it's been a really proven lever for building wealth. And like that's just a fear people have to kind of get over and go educate themselves on. No one is encouraging it. I'm not encouraging jumping in and dumping money into something you don't understand.
Right. No, I mean, 100%. I mean, it takes pain to realize it. I think you're 100% right, because that's what it took for me to do it. When I was already doing small stuff, like I said before, small single family, small multifamily, and I was staying in that kind of realm. Once I got canned from job number, whatever, pick a number, it's terrible. Here I am yet again in my 40s wondering what's going to happen next, right? And yeah, it's terrible. Who wants to deal with that, And for me, it was more like taking the bull by the horns and learning how to do this business. That's really what it comes down to, is getting the knowledge to execute properly on this business. Because I think that's what holds a lot of people back too, is fear of, how do I do this? And if I don't know how to do this, then screw it, I'm not going to do it. I'm just going to sit down and just, relax or whatever. That's usually what happens. And I think that's like, I would imagine when you're given an example of sitting around the dinner table and hearing about these different things that happened, it's because the person who's trying to make that decision had no idea what the hell they're doing. That's usually what it is. I invested in some deal and deal went sideways. Whoa, I'm never doing real estate again. It's like, well, right. It's probably because the clues are there. You just ignored them.
Right. I mean, you just jogged my memory about a real story. This was not my own. This was a family member's brief. There was an agreement made without anything on paper, right? Like the most common reason that I would say within a family, this type of stuff goes south. And formality keeps people friends, right? Keeps family. And that's the type of stuff that oftentimes does lead to hardship, and it leads to lost capital, and it leads to broken relationships, frankly. And that stuff kind of breaks my heart when I hear about it, because there's so many more positive, wonderful ways to de-risk these types of investments. Like as a passive investor, like I started out this process, and I think about it cleanly in like three ways, a 3-phase journey in hindsight. Looking back at anything in life that was hard, that was new, that was learning something, new topic, new adventure, it always seems so clear, but this was messy. This was like chopping through learnings with a figurative machete at the time, Augustino. We bought that first rental locally while working full time. Jennifer and I working full time. This is when we started our commercial real estate journey. And this is a duplex. It's $200 a month in cash flow. And then we were like, wow, there goes $100,000 of our capital. We worked really hard to save that money. We didn't understand cash flow investing. We wanted monthly income. So we looked outside of California for all the reasons, one of the many reasons that you outlined earlier, which is, there's price points that are better, but you can still get the benefits. And so we looked to the Midwest. We bought up to 5 single family rentals. That was phase 2 of 3 phases in our hindsight rearview mirror. $250 a month roughly in cash flow average across those properties we bought. $60,000 each purchase price. Just mind blowing, for a person not sitting out here who just purchased another one for $430. Then we learned what, D-class properties means though. And that is, turnkey. As far as turnkey properties go, we bought those ones turnkey. And I think that was there's nothing wrong inherently with a turnkey model, meaning, buying it. I know, what this means already clearly because you're deep into this expertise, but like for the audience, just to say we bought these properties with them leased. The tenant was there. They were recently repaired, good standing. I did all the diligence I could. I didn't visit in person. I couldn't, but I did everything remotely I could. I even paid a company to go and take videos, photos, looked at all the due diligence. I was so deep into these numbers. I did my homework. Still, in hindsight, we learned the lesson that a D-class property, or even I would say a lot of C-class, is going to turn over at least once a year. So you're going to lose those tenants. And when the tenant leaves, they sometimes leave presents in the form of damage. Has to get repaired. They also squash all that wonderful cash flow, all that profit from that year within that.
Yeah.
So
that's right.
That was phase 2 for us. And also we finally learned the lesson. It took us 6 properties to get there. But there is no such thing. This is my belief. There's no such thing as a passive rental property. Period.
No, there's no such thing. And the only way that is if you're an LP. That's right. And you're invested in, if you're invested in net lease, that's the closest thing I could find. Yes. In the net lease deal, right? I don't want to get into it here, but yeah, a single tenant net lease, if you have a fund, like we have a fund for the LPs that invest in those deals, it's a monthly check. It's very, very predictable.
Totally.
But and the LPs don't have to do anything. Like we're doing all the work up front, and it's not really a whole lot of management on our side, right? But yeah, absolutely. But I think you're right about the single family thing, man. I mean, it's, I tell you, $250, $300 is gone if you stack up that cash flow for the entire year and the tenant leaves, you're spending the entire cash flow plus just to get the unit back to where it was and then put another tenant in there and do it all over again. It's crazy. The only way that deal's going to work is if there's an opportunity for it to increase in value and then maybe could sell it off, That's the only way it works. Hey, my fellow Bulletproof Cash Flow enthusiasts, I want to take a moment to thank you from the bottom of my heart for being an integral part of our fantastic community. Your support truly means the world to me and the entire team. If you've been enjoying this valuable insights that we've been sharing here, here's a humble request. Could you please subscribe to the show and leave a review on Apple Music? By doing so, you help us deliver more top-notch content and connect with even more passionate investors just like you. Thank you so much for continued support, and let's jump back into the show. And it's the only way it works.
Spot on, yeah. And we sold those at a profit that we were very happy to take. It wasn't as big as we would have wanted, but we're happy we got it. And yeah. To validate your point, though, on the LP position, I mean, the third phase of those 3, and we'd done the local one, we did the Midwest ones, the turnkeys, and then phase 3 was when we started putting money in, put in $25K in our first LP position, limited partner, passive investment in a multifamily deal. And it was an 8-year hold. It exited in just over 2 years. That was eye-opening. It was eye-opening, and clearly the 2-year hold and an 8-year hold, planned hold period was something that like the market helped with that, obviously. But I would say the team did a great job. And in the end, that's when I was like, oh, there is a actually passive way to do this. And that's what started this chapter of the journey. That's why we now do what I do here at Madison Investing. Is like, there's so many great people out there doing what you do, which is you find properties, competent, experienced, and you can de-risk what can be de-risked, buy great assets, improve them, or whatever business model makes sense, as long as the team knows what they're doing. And then as an investor, I can be passive. And so I just wanted to walk through that third step, because ultimately, maybe someday we'll buy more rentals, but not when we have young kids. I'll tell you that much. We're not trying to add overhead.
Right. Yeah. It's like that's a whole different ball game. I mean, right now, we don't really talk about it too much on the show, or I don't really talk about it much with anybody really. We have a bunch of single families, right? And the only way the single family model really works is there's 2 things. You have to buy a lot of them, and the leverage needs to be very, very small, 50% preferably. Why 50%? Because then if you have another COVID incident across the entire portfolio and say, at worst case, half the people stop paying the rent, then at least the ones that are currently left can still cover the entire mortgage. If provide, so you're basically building up a lot of room for error, right?
Yes.
I mean, that's tough to do. That's tough to do.
And each one of those you bought, I mean, you had to go through the whole process, I assume. I mean,
each time, one by one.
Sign the docs on the loan, title.
Yeah. I mean, I was buying like 4 or 5 at a time. I mean, it's not like it's crazy from that perspective. But yes, what you're doing is you're paying the title, you're paying all the other fees, whatever, inspections, yada yada yada, individually for each house. So yeah, it's much smaller than say, one big multifamily. But hey, it's two different types of deals, 2 different asset classes, right?
Absolutely, yeah.
Different profile, So, but yeah, man. I mean, it's single family. It's it might be okay for some people, but it does take a lot more work to run.
Yeah, I think one of the common questions that I get, I'm sure you get this a lot as well, is folks sitting there and saying, well, they ask me, like, what should I do? And I was like, well, I can't answer that for you. I can tell you my experience. I could tell you what has worked. I can tell you also, ultimately, the most helpful question I wish I knew earlier as an investor, as a passive investor, which is, what's the goal for the money? And that question is so powerful because it kind of just clicks up the whole thought process and the lens for any person who's sitting there going 0 to 60. Because I do this too. Everyone does, right? Like, they sit there and they see a Facebook ad, they hear a great podcast, maybe one just like this one, and then they're like, okay, I want to do only that. And sure, I mean, I hope people hear you and I today talk and they're like, oh, they learned something, and they also take away inspiration for going and following an investment strategy that might work for them. But at the same time, not doing it blindly, like stopping there and asking myself, before I deploy 100K into a deal, 200K into a deal, personally, with my own money, what do I need this to do for me? And it sounds so simple, but I have no shortage of names and relationships of LPs I could reference that are way smarter than I am. IQs off the charts, data scientists, mechanical engineers, electrical engineers, and they will sit there and say, well, I don't know if I want cash flow or growth. And I would say, well, then you should take a step back. is my feedback typically, because this is not rocket science. But people want to over-engineer the most simple but more important question, which is, what's the goal for the money? And I didn't want to soapbox too much on that, but it's come up, I would say, even more frequently this year. And for all the understandable reasons, Agostino, because there's more FUD in the air. There's more fear and uncertainty and doubt, and it's not all rising tide raising all ships. And so people are sitting there second guessing themselves. And so those principles help me every day when I'm sitting there trying to make the right decision, not the quick decision, not the trendy decision, the right decision for my own capital. And for what it's worth, I hope someone else hears that sitting there going, I'm looking at 10 different deals and they all say they have a 70-30 split and they've got a good looking preferred return. And I want to go with that one because it's got a better picture. You're like, hit the brakes, man. Hit the brake. I'm
not surprised by that. I'm not surprised by that. It's usually some of the decision-making process, right? I would say that most of the people that hit us up, they're looking for just steady cash flow, like steady cash flow. That's why we, like, whenever someone asks for that, we'd say, let's talk about net lease and say why net lease works and, that kind of thing. If they're interested in, like, if they don't really need to have access to the money for some period of time, we talk about development, right? Because you get a big juicy squeeze out of that over time. You just won't see any cash flow until the place, starts getting built out, right? And it's occupied and it's cash flowing. So, yeah, 2 very, very different models to your point. It's 2 very different things. But I know you do self-storage, right?
Yes, big fan of self-storage.
Yeah. So I love self-storage too. We're not at any self-storage right now, but I've done enough research to know that self-storage is really, really cool. I mean, it's from the standpoint that it's very similar to net lease in the sense that it's, pretty much it can almost run itself with the right tech in there. right?
Yes.
It can automate the whole process. I think that the toughest part these days is just trying to find a decent deal, right?
100%. And I think one of the things that led me to self-storage, this was actually back in around 2018. I was already investing now in multifamily, had the rental journey. And at the time I was looking specifically for our own portfolio for some cash flow. And so I do want to pause before we go further in self-storage and just validate the comparison point you made between the net lease stuff and development stuff. Those two examples are perfectly aligned for fundamentally different goals, right? Like one investor cash flow, one investor growth, like perfect. Like I hope someone hearing that gets that. Like there's a primary reason you should invest in one thing, right? There's always other nice benefits, but if someone's sitting there saying, I want a blend of both, I want growth and I want cash flow. It's like, well, okay, just take it one step further, investor. It's because I was back in 2018, I was looking for stronger cash flow, and I found self-storage for that. And also I just loved the thesis behind it because it's this unique moment in the self-storage market. It's been happening now for years, right? And there's people out there that could run circles around me with the expertise level on this. So I don't claim to be a deeper expert than operators who are hands-on making these modernization plays on these old mom and pop self-storage facilities. But I've walked a lot of them. I've invested in a lot of them. I've been part of VP teams that have bought a lot of them. And I will say that you're buying this facility that stores stuff. Sounds simple, but modernizing them to exactly your point, Augustino, is like relatively simple. I mean, you're basically plugging in fairly new software systems, and there's a ton of different options for every level of a tech stack on these things, So going in and buying a current functioning mom and pop storage facility from someone who is aging out or just kind of tired of managing it, maybe wants a compelling reason to go and have their own form of golden parachute, leave that behind. That's a huge win for investors that can play along with that, because ultimately there's this big consolidation happening. There's only so many storage facilities happening or out there in the country right now, and they're getting bought up, put into portfolios. Investors can help buy those portfolios along with a good team. And then on the other side of that, huge institutional buyers want to buy those things too. And it's a strong, stable investment as seen by the big institutional investors. Huge, the biggest fund ever in storage ever formed happened at the beginning of this year. Billions of dollars and from institutional capital to scoop up these big portfolios of self-storage. But sorry for the long-winded tangent, but I get fired up about that. And it's a great asset class.
No, it really is. I mean, I did enough research to know something about it. And I think the one thing that caused me to really back off of it was the fact that you really, really, really have to understand how to select, if it's going to be a new build, select where exactly to build it. Because it's not like multifamily. People need to live somewhere, right? People don't need to store their crap that they no longer look at in their garage, right? They don't need to do that. So it's like, you have to be very careful with that. So there's building it out is an issue. It was for me anyway. And then also to buy an existing asset already running, I found that you have to have some marketing chops to really do the local outreach, to do social media marketing, to do all that type of scenario. Not that you don't need it for multifamily, but when you hit that 95%, 98%, I mean, you just increase the rents and you just, you can adjust all that stuff, right?
Right.
With a business, like whether it's a self-storage or a pizza joint or whatever, you're still marketing all the time. You're always hitting that market. You need to stay visible, at top of mind, that kind of thing. It's a very different scenario. I think people just fall in love with the returns and they forget about it. And unless you're investing again as an LP, there's work involved in actually running the day-to-day business of a self-storage. Is that what do you have to say about that?
It all comes down to, similar theme, I would say, to the types of assets and playbooks that you're running on the properties and that you're working on right now, whether it's like triple net or new development, Augustino, which is you have the experience to do it, right? Yeah, and you have the chops in the background of the team. Hard fought. I think that, we all skin our knees in different ways. And I think that I will always primarily associate myself as being a passive investor first, like an LP first, right? Like that is why I got drawn to the space, because I was like kind of floored by the fact it was actually passive, having gone through those first two stages of that journey I walked you through earlier, and being like, oh, there is actually a passive way to invest in these things as an LP, whether it's self-storage, multifamily, mobile home park, data center, medical office, and keep on going. But picking the teams that can actually do this stuff is the biggest way to de-risk. And, we literally put together like a 5-part vetting framework, for our own investing purposes when this all started, because I'm a big framework nerd guy, from operations and tech companies for 13 years. So it's just a quick way to make a good decision that's otherwise pretty hard to make quickly. You got to sit there and think, who's this team, in the form of like, number one, track record. Have they done it before? Including, do they have a repeatable process? Because if someone's done something multiple times, they should have a repeatable process for how they do it. Like buying a self-storage facility, how do they buy it? How do they improve it? What software do they use? Staffing needs, improvements and stuff. Then you've got just, the legal side, the communications. How do people communicate with their investors? Do they have financial transparency? How do they source their materials for construction? I don't want to put people to sleep here, but just there's so many facets to de-risking, but it really starts with the who. It's, the what and the where, all those things are important. The why, important, but who's at the helm of the ship. And that's how I've approached it, is like, find great partners, because I can't swing a hammer. I just can't. I Jennifer, my better half, between her being better at this and YouTube saving my life daily, painting this wall behind me was a mess. I'll tell you that much. But I have to rely on people who play to their strengths, and that is not mine. And so I know how to de-risk the deal from a financial perspective. I know how to de-risk the deal when it comes to picking great partners, because I've hired hundreds of people in a prior life. And I've managed partnerships, and I've led teams globally, and I've done some stuff that's pretty hardcore. Like, I've led teams of 200 people when I was 27 years old, and that was way earlier than I should have been. I was in over my skis. So that's how you learn. So like, that's the stuff I can bring to bear. But if you're sitting there going, man, how do I know if I found a good partner, if I'm about to go invest in a good deal? You got to find people who do, and then learn from them, and ask good questions. Yep. So thanks for bearing with the soapbox.
No, but that's 100% right. I mean, I've said it on this show numerous times. We have a mastermind. We talk about the importance of partnering with the right folks. And I mean, over the past many years, I built a great team that could do certain things very, very well. Like I have a team of attorneys that handle net lease. We have a team of attorneys that handle the acquisition. We have a team of attorneys that handle the development side. I had to make some recent changes on the development side and bring in a different group to do that now, because the other guys just got too big for them. Bring in a different team. Yeah, sometimes you have to switch out players, right? Because as you continue growing the business, but what you just said a second ago, you have to assess the right team, because the team could sink or swim, or make you sink or swim, right? Especially when it comes to lenders. That's one of the biggest beefs I have is with folks that I get these messages all the time on LinkedIn. Hey, I just like your photo. Do you have anything that needs a refi? Oof. No, thanks. And it's like, I'm not mad at them or something like that, but it's like, I'm not going to hand over $100 million deal to some guy just send me a message. I'm not doing that. Like, yeah. It's like, because here's the thing. When I have a bunch of people and investors that are looking to me after I tell them that we're going to refinance something, and I work with some guy who had never worked before and he doesn't deliver, I'm the one that looks like an idiot, not that guy. He gets to go home and eat bonbons in front of the TV. I got to clean up the mess.
Yep.
I'm not doing
relationship now more than ever is showing why it's so important.
Exactly. Before, lenders are begging people to take their money. Now it's like they close their doors and they're being jerks about it. Yeah. So that's 100% right. Choose wisely. Absolutely. Choose wisely. All right. Well, check it out, Spencer. We've been talking for a while now here. I appreciate you hanging out with me here. So what sort of bulletproof advice would you have for someone that is really thinking about investing, thinking about getting into a deal and not really sure what to do? Like, what sort of bulletproof advice would you offer that person? Enjoying the ride? Dive into the real estate game at bulletproofcashflow.com. Got a bunch of free resources there, as well as masterminds that you can join in on. Success awaits there. Go ahead and check it out.
Begin with the end in mind. But to take that a step further, I'll harken back to the same question that we chatted about a moment ago, which is think to oneself, like, what's the goal for the money? And I love that prompt, because I'll keep this brief, but I'll just say, if you can't answer that, then you're a human, right? Like most times when I sit there and I'm excited about looking at an investment, I stop and I say, I don't know if I'm ready to answer that question. I'm about to make an emotional decision. So then you might have to take another step back. And in that moment, that's a good thing. Like embrace that, because if you can't answer the question of what's the goal for my 100K, what's the goal for my 200K, that means that you haven't set a 5-year horizon goal. Like, are you trying to grow your wealth, or are you trying to get cash flow instead? Like those are the basics. So I would just say that would be the bulletproof advice I would share for today.
Love it. Love it. Love it. All right. Well, guys, if you want to reach out to Spencer, you can reach him via his website at madisoninvesting.com. Hope you got some insight on getting deals done. Partnerships, of course, big part of it. And we touched on self-storage too, a wide variety of things. But the key thing here to realize that if you are currently in the rat race and you want to get out, now's the time to think about it. At least think about it, right? There are ways for you to get that passive income by either investing as an LP, getting the right training. We have a mastermind at Bulletproof Cashflow to help you get into the game as well. So check that out too, bulletproofcashflow.com. Plenty of information out there, free books and such too. So thanks very much for joining us. Appreciate it. See you next time.
You've been listening to the Bulletproof Cashflow Show. We hope you've enjoyed the show. We know we had fun. Make sure to visit our Apple Podcast page and leave us a 5-star review. We hope you've gotten some useful and practical information from the show. For real estate coaching, events, and resources, hit up bulletproofcashflow.com. Till next time.
No information in this episode should be considered specific, personal, or professional advice. Any investment opportunities mentioned on this show are limited to accredited or sophisticated investors. Any investments will only be made with proper disclosure and subscription documentation and subject to all applicable laws. Please consult an appropriate tax, legal, real estate, financial, or business professional for individualized advice.